Hello everybody, my name is Sarnath, and in this video I am going to talk about business forecasting during COVID times. In particular, I will help you arrive at a factor called COVID factor that you can incorporate directly into your time series models and make them more accurate. Uh, in the description box of the video, you can find the links to my GitHub account, which has this COVID factor. You can just download it and use it. It also has links to the other websites that I'm referring in my video, so you can also be benefited from that. So without much ado, let's start. So in traditional time series analysis, most of us, what we'll be doing is we take an observed data, which is our original data time series. We break that down into trend and seasonality. That's the second and third box here. And then we leave certain things as residual or noise, which cannot be modeled, right? So this is your observed is equal to trend plus seasonality plus residual, an additive model. That is the most common time series analysis that we do. However, if you look at time series like this, what COVID has done is, prior to 2020, there was a monotonically increasing time series, not monotonically increasing, but it has an upward trend. And after COVID, it just went plummeted by April 2020. It reached the northern, and then slowly it's recovering from there. Right now, this is one type of time series. How do we forecast this time series? Right, especially if we have 2 or 3 years of data before this, we know the trend, we know the seasonality and all that. But now we have got a new trend. Is the seasonality affected? We don't know. We need to check, right? There are so many things that we need to do for forecasting this time series. Another type of time series you might have experienced is this one, right? By April and May, or March and April, you expected some kind of a panic sales, because this was the first time people heard about COVID, lockdown, shutdown, and all that, and people were afraid that they may run out of groceries and all that. So everybody panicked during this time frame. And if you're looking at some grocery time series, you will definitely see a huge spike in sales during this period, followed by somewhat mediocre sales, because once that initial shock is over, the sales plummeted, and then again COVID does wrecked the time series, right? Or you might even see business time series which were benefited by COVID, especially online education and that kind of industries, in which after COVID there was a sudden increase in trend and all that, right? So how do we model these kind of time series? One way to do that is to use some features like flexible trends. For example, if you look at profit, they have something called change points. So the profit can be used to specify directly the change point, and then we can use that to model the new trend that is going on. That is one way to do it, right? And second, you need to ensure that uh, the seasonalities are not changed, right? Like, hopefully it is not changed, but in your case, if the seasonality is changed, you will have to model it in a different way, right? So that will be completely outside the scope of what I'm going to talk today, but I'm just giving you a hint. You might have to go check on seasonality as well, right? And then if there are some strange events like this, like panic sale is an event that happened once, like for the rest of the time it doesn't matter at all, right? So you can use a separate factors, like indicative factors, like a binary flag that can be set to one only for March and April 2020, so that it absorbs the time series shock properly, so that the time series model can focus on the getting the trend and seasonality right. Sometimes what happens is these kind of outlier points can affect the entire trend of time series output. Okay, so it's better to absorb these kind of outliers and shocks using a separate a separate flag variable, right? So if you look at profit has support for this external regressors. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about an external regressor called COVID factor that we will arrive at. This COVID factor would basically tell what was the intensity of COVID from March 2020 until today. What was the intensity of COVID, right? And we will calculate it using publicly available data sources, and we will come up with a value for the COVID factor, and you can just download this COVID factor and use it in your models straight away, right? So, and this COVID factor can be used as a regressor in your time series model. And if you're using profit, it's much more simpler, because profit directly supports external regressors. What I mean by external regressors is, here's an example that talks about vehicle sales, rental sales of bicycles. So this is the Y column is the rental sales of bicycles, and together we also have some covariates called temperature, rain, sun, and wind. Right, so how is temperature different from sun? I don't know. So so we have got these kind of four different external regressors. We can add this as external regressors to the model. So apart from the usual monthly, weekly, yearly seasonalities that is present in this Y, the time series model will also be able to use the temperature, rain, sun, and wind as external regressors and come up with coefficients for them. Right, again, these regressors can be additive, multiplicative. There are some nuances to it. You can read upon the Prophet library to know more. Uh, but ultimately, this is what Prophet does. It just breaks down into trend. You see that's a trend, and then it also estimates the impact of holidays, the yearly seasonality, the weekly seasonality, and the extra regressors. In this case, they have used multiplicative regressors, so you can see extra regressors, multiplicative factors. So it breaks down the time series like this, right? So without much ado, I would also recommend to read this interview with Rami Crispin. Daliana Liu is from LinkedIn, and she's pretty famous there. And she does this data scientist show. And in one of these data scientist show, which is number 29, is with Rami Crispin, who is an engineering manager for data science in Apple. And around 7 minutes 30 seconds in this video, she asks him about how do you handle shocks in time series, right? So he also talks about special flag variables, indicator variables to handle shocks like the panic sales and all that. And then he also talks about how they use spline based approach. They use some curve fitting for the post COVID era, and then they use that for and use that to project, and then find out some use that to project in their forecasting models. Right, it's a very interesting interview, so you probably can look that up. Right, and then in our case, if we want to estimate a value for COVID, let's say we want to create a COVID factor, the first thing we probably look at is the number of confirmed cases of COVID. Can we take this as a time series? There is a daily time series available in WHO website. Can we use this as a COVID factor? Does it model the intensity of COVID? Unfortunately, no is the answer for this. Why? If you look at March and April, you see that this is the lowest numbers that you see, right? But these are the times which had the highest impact in your time series. Either your time series fell flat or it had a huge spike, right? One of this happened during this time frame, right? But that is not captured in terms of the confirmed cases. So the confirmed cases is different from the perception of COVID and the impact of COVID, right? And this is something is we need to keep in mind, right? It's a very strange thing, but yeah, but that is what it is. If we use this as a factor, we will not get correct answers, right? So although this website is really beautiful, like you can go by region and look at the COVID waves, different COVID waves in different countries and regions, right? Even in, yeah, so in all these countries you can see that there's a Omicron really wreaked havoc because it had more confirmed cases and less mortality. But by March and April, none of these countries had any spike to indicate that there was something really bad, right? So that is, yeah, so that is what it is. So can we find out some other data source which captures the impact of COVID? So when I looked for such a data source, I found that tourism is a good place to look at, right? What happens to the world tourism? Because tourism directly tells you that people are not ready to go out, right? People want to stay put in their home. The tourism industry is affected. So the number of tourists traveling every month is a very good indicator of a impact of COVID because it has come down only because of COVID, right? So if we can get those numbers, then we can use that as an alibi for our work, right? So thus I came across this beautiful website. There are several websites There are several websites. If you go and search for world tourism arrivals, so this is one such nice but they have data only until 2018 if you look at this, so it's absolutely not useful for us. If you come here, you have the statista, which basically gives you a yearly numbers only, not monthly numbers. It will be nice to have monthly numbers, but if you try to download anything, they say, oh, pay this much money. Okay, thank you, I'm not paying that. So then we found this UNWTO website, which is exactly what we wanted. So it has 2020, 2021, and 2022 data. This is a Power BI dashboard. And if you look at 2020, they're talking about how much the tourism got affected. If you see the April had the highest effect on tourism. April, May, right? Then gradually it reduces, only gradually in 2020. If you go to 2021, it further reduces very nicely, right? And 2022, they still, it's like minus 67 percentage. I think they're still able to update the data. But and you can also go by region or like sub regions in this case, right? So which is like North Africa, Americas, you can go a little bit deeper. If you are Asia, you can go still Northeast Asia, Oceania. Okay, all that is good. Or you can also do a grouping here, like this like GCC countries, ASEAN countries, like that. So I think it's pretty good actually. So we can use this. So what I have done is I have just taken this data. I've just created an Excel sheet here. So for every month, I look at the tourism numbers from the this one, and I put the tourism number. I calculate this percentage manually. What is the percentage drop? Then you can consider this minus 97 percentage as one. If that becomes one, what will the rest of them become, right? So you just calculate that as a COVID factor. Once you calculate that as a COVID factor, you can use this column in your time series analysis straight away. Okay, and that will be very useful. And this is also present in my GitHub account. You can see that I've just put the Excel sheet there. You can download it from there. And that brings us to the end of the video. Please don't forget to check the links in the description of this video. I'll put all these links in the description. If you like this, please subscribe to my channel. There will be more such stuff coming up in the coming days. Thank you.